Hello, and welcome to Spirit Among Us. In the book of Hebrews, a question is posed. How shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? Now this week I want to address that question. And I want to ask specifically, how great is the salvation that's been given to us? How wonderful is this gift that is given to us by God? That is what I want to explore this week and try to understand. Firstly, where we need to start, when we need to understand why the salvation we have is truly great, is that we all have an unpayable debt. Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 18, verses 23 through 27. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. So here in the book of Matthew, Jesus has given us a parable. He's given us a story, an analogy to compare the kingdom of God to. He says it's like this man who owed a debt. There's a man who owed a debt to his king, and it's a debt he couldn't pay for. He couldn't pay it off when his king wanted him to pay it off. His master ordered him to pay him back, and the servant said, "I can't. I don't have the money." And so it was Jewish custom at that time, where if someone couldn't pay for their debt, if they couldn't pay back the person they owed, they might become their servant. They might become a servant, and that's how they would pay them back. They'd pay them back with their labor, their time, and their work. But this servant fell on his knees and said, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. So I want us to notice some things about this. Now, Jesus gave us this parable to compare to the kingdom of God. In other words, this is us. We should be placing ourselves in this story, understanding that we have a debt. And now it's not just a debt that we can't pay right now. It's a debt that we could never pay. And we can find that in the language of this parable here. You see, the servant said, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." But the king knew that he couldn't. The king knew maybe his heart was saying he would pay everything back. He would plan to. He would try to pay everything back. But he knew that that was impossible. He wouldn't be able to. And so what does it say? He had pity for him. Out of pity, the master released him and forgave him the debt. He didn't say, "Well, okay, I'll trust you. I'll give you the chance to pay me everything back. I'll give you the chance to make all that money to pay me back." He didn't go there because he knew that this man, this servant, would not be able to pay the master back. It was not possible. It was too much money. And so instead of saying, "Here, I trust you, go for it, you can pay me back in a few years or something," he had pity on him, and he forgave him of his debt. Now, in this same way, in our lives, we have all broken God's command. We've all fallen short of his glory, turned against him in so many different ways, and we owe him an unpayable debt. Now, for the servant in the parable, the unpayable debt was going to lead him into slavery. But for us, the unpayable debt is something that is much worse. It's a place of eternal torment, separation from God, a place of unending torture. That's where our debt was bringing us. That was the justice, the way we pay off the debt that we owe God. So like servants before a king, we owe him everything. But we can't give him everything. We can't give him enough to pay off this debt. And understanding this will help us to understand why we have such a great salvation. Let's take a look at Romans chapter 8, verses 3 and 4. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do, by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. So God did what the law and what the flesh could not do. What the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. God did what we couldn't do. He paid our debt. He sent his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be an offering for sin, the spotless lamb that was sacrificed to pay for the debt that we owe. And this spotless lamb is God himself. So, it is such a great salvation that we have access to. We need to understand that we all, before God, have an unpayable debt. And if we've put our faith, our trust, and our hope in Jesus Christ, then he has taken that debt and forgiven us completely. Thank you for watching, and God bless.